Exactly 7 a.m. A sound like a banshee's cry tore through the quiet cul-de-sac of hilltop oaks. It wasn't a bose. The usual chirping of birds or the soft of sprinklers that stirred the sleepy neighborhood awake. It was blaring, defiant honk that sounded like it came from hell's own garbage truck. Curtains rustled, blinds twitched, children peeked from upstairs bedrooms while parents rubbed their eyes in disbelief. And at the epicenter of the suburban storm stood Karen, bathrobe clinging to her like armor, leopard print slippers stomping the asphalt with purpose, one hand gripping clipboard, the other clutching her phone like grenade ready to detonate. Her voice, sharp and shrill, bounced off stucco walls with the conviction of someone delivering the Sermon on the Mount, except the Mount was sidewalk crack and the sermon was threat. Tow it. I don't care if it has cannon. It's blocking the curb, and I've got rights. The object of her fury. The 60-ton of Abrams tank parked with absolute serenity beside the community park. Its steel hulk gleamed under the morning sun, casting a shadow that reached halfway across the street, a behemoth of state-mandated presence that hadn't moved an inch since it was stationed there the day before as part of National Guard readiness drill. Printed notice had gone out week prior. Every home received it, neatly placed in plastic sleeves and slid under door handles. The city and the Guard had coordinated everything. Most of the residents found it exciting, even patriotic. Children took photos beside it. Retired veterans smiled with wet eyes. A local baker dropped off cookies at the Guard's small tent. But not Karen. Maybe she never read the notice. Maybe she did and decided it didn't apply to her because rules, after all, were for other people. People without clipboards and committees named after themselves. See, Karen wasn't just resident of Hilltop Oaks. She was the self-appointed head of the Curbside Aesthetic Division, one-woman home militia focused on line lawn gnomes, enforcing mailbox uniformity, and now apparently commanding tactical ground units to vacate her visual perimeter. It had started the day before when Karen returned early from a yoga class she didn't finish because the instructor wouldn't allow her emotional support parrot to perch on her shoulder mid-Savasana. She saw the tank before she even turned into her driveway, and her entire body froze like she posed. Adee just discovered crime scene on her own lawn. To her, it wasn't display of defense or service. It was blemish. Flaming dumpster parked on Persian Brook, slammed her brakes, double-parked in the middle of the street, and sat in silence. Then, as if possessed by a divine mandate, she stormed into her house and returned with weapons. An iPad for evidence, a set of color-coded flags to mark violations, and a wireless microphone connected to her Hoa Newsletter's YouTube channel. That morning, the tank wasn't just an eyesore, it was an affront. Declaration of war. She paced back and forth, issuing commentary like news anchor reporting from war zone. Only her war was with the concept. Compromised in reality itself. This is residential zone. She barked into the camera, her voice rising with each syllable. There are children here, families, people who deserve to look out their windows and see hydrangeas, not weapons of war. A few feet away, Travis, barely 23, musket sharp enough to slice concrete, stood at ease. His uniform was spotless, his demeanor calm. He had seen Latin drills, but never this. He approached slowly, hands visible, smiled gentle. Ma'am, he said, with patience earned from weeks in desert heat, the vehicle is secured and non-operational. This drill has full authorization for 48 hours. We're here as part of emergency preparedness. Karen blinked at him as if he'd just explained calculus in Swahili. Then she scoffed. Well, it wasn't authorized by me, she said, practically vibrating with indignation. Do you even understand what horror resale value is? Have you read the bylaws? Travis, unsure whether to laugh or run, attempted to explain again. He never got the chance. She was already dialing. Her voice crescendoed into a wail as she called the tow company, describing the tank as an abandoned, oversized military style of a strategically omitting the fact that it was armed with armor plating and weighed as much as a small commercial jet. She offered to pay triple if they came fast. She waved her Ho violation forms like they were legal subpoenas. And within 20 minutes, truck from Roller Right Recovery rolled down the street, rumbling like thunder. Driver unaware he was about to become footnote in the most absurd suburban showdown of the decade. The tow truck operator, Duke mid-40s, bearded, suspiciously relaxed, stepped out, looked at the tank, then back at Karen, then back at the tank. You gotta be kidding me, he muttered. You called us for that? Karen, unbothered, pointed at the tank's treads. Hook it up, she snapped. I have dinner party tonight, and I won't have it ruined by cosplay. Travis stepped in again. Sir, I really need you not to touch that vehicle. It's under state jurisdiction. This is not a civilian matter. Duke scratched his head, his mouth twisting into grimace of someone who'd realized they were now part of a story they wouldn't be able to explain to their boss without sounding drunk. Lady, sign waiver, he said. Her name's on it, not mine. And that's when the cavalry arrived. Sleek black SUV screeched around the corner, tires whispering menace, and out stepped Sergeant Delgado, living embodiment of the phrase, "Don't test me." He wore mirrored sunglasses, an expression carved from granite and posture that could straighten crooked spines on sight. He said nothing at first. He didn't need to. Silence hung over the cul-de-sac like judgment. Karen tried to hand him color-coded diagram. He didn't look at it. He just turned to Travis and said, "Document everything." Karen, undeterred, turned her bullhorn back on. "I'm protecting this community," she yelled. "I think I deserve medal." From somewhere, dog barked. As if laughing, teenager across the street started live streaming. Drone buzzed overhead. The neighborhood, which had once quietly obsessed over hedge trimming schedules and parking spot etiquette, had become Coliseum. Then, as Duke tried to attach the tow cable Delgado made, a single call, 2 more military vehicles arrived within minutes. Roller ride recovery was politely escorted away. Karen began, citing the Constitution. She threatened lawsuits. She invoked her horror role so many times you'd think she had diplomatic immunity. But nothing stopped the slow, dignified removal of her illusions. The tank remained. The tow truck left. And Karen stood still, red-faced and furious, framed by crowd now 50 deep. She didn't know yet that her face was already becoming mean. That is still frame of her mid-scream with the caption. She tried to tow tank, would circle the globe before the day was done. She didn't know that this wouldn't end here, that her attempts to reclaim power would only make things worse, that the tank wouldn't be the thing that moved. Her grip on reality would. And as the sun climbed higher into the sky, casting long shadows behind the steel beast, it was clear to everyone in Hilltop Oaks that something extraordinary had just, the first domino had fallen. And the woman in the bathrobe had no idea. She had just declared war on a symbol that didn't flinch, didn't move, didn't care, and wouldn't budge for anyone, clipboard or not. By the time the morning sun climbed past the roof lines of Hilltop Oaks, the tank had become more than just machine. It had transformed into silent character in an unfolding suburban drama. Motionless protagonist in neighborhood opera of delusion, pride, and public spectacle, fueled not by logic, but by an ever-deepening conviction in her moral superiority, was already back in action. Her bathrobe had been replaced with a red power suit tailored within an inch of its polyester life, and heels that clicked like gavels with every determined step across the cul-de-sac pavement. This time she didn't bring clipboard, she brought bullhorn, positioning herself dramatically in front of the tank like some self-declared general rallying against invading forces. Karen began broadcasting fresh tirade. "This is hostile occupation," she shouted. "This is not just tank. This is message that our voices don't matter." Her words echoed off the pastel-colored homes, bouncing into the ears of neighbors now cautiously sipping coffee behind their curtains, unsure whether to feel amused or alarmed. Some had already made peace with the absurdity and pulled out lawn chairs. Others just wanted their Hoa fees back. Unbeknownst to Karen, overnight her tantrum had metastasized online. Clips of her screeching face were now stitched into musical remixes and parody edits. TikTok teens made dances out of her "I am the authorization" moment. One clip, where she waved Hoa violations lips like magical incantations, had been set to wizard battle music entitled "Karen Potter and the Hoa of Doom." Subreddit was formed. Merchandise site launched shirts that read, "Tow the tank, Karen," all before 9 a.m. But none of this filtered through Karen's carefully curated digital bubble. Her Facebook feed was shrine of echo chambers filled with likes and hearts from a handful of fellow Hoa zealots and conspiracy uncles. As far as she could tell, the world was rallying behind her. She was Joan of Arc in high heels, standing her ground in defense of property values, unaware that the world saw her more as Don Quixote tilting at a cannon turret. Inside the camouflage tent beside the tank, Travis scrolled through the meme storm with a grin he tried to hide behind a coffee cup. Delgado sat across from him, stoic, flipping through a stack of incident reports and city coordination documents. His phone buzzed every few minutes. Local officials, military liaisons, media queries. The absurd had become official. They weren't just managing drill anymore. They were managing wildfire. Still, he remained calm. There was a method to his stillness. Like the tank itself, he moved only when necessary. And when he did, things shifted. Karen, however, never stopped moving. She called another emergency Hoa meeting. Only 3 people showed up. The rest had begun to ghost her calls, texts, and Hoa email chains. Undeterred, she live-streamed the meeting from her porch, declaring in an open forum on military overreach in residential spaces. Her audience, her parrot, garden gnome, and one confused Amazon delivery driver who quickly backed away. At precisely 10:42 a.m., the real tension began. Karen placed another call. This time not to tow company. This time she reached out to private security contractor listed on forums she frequented about. Sovereign Living. She didn't mention the tank. She described vehicle-related trespassing event involving state entities, and asked if they handled civilian perimeter defense. The man on the other end, Chuck, assured her he'd handled situation escalations before, though most of those involved shoplifters and birthday party fights. He showed up 30 minutes later wearing mirrored sunglasses, a faded polo that might have once been blue, and utility belt with zip ties, flashlight, and what looked like half-used pepper spray. He saluted Karen like he was reporting to Superior. She handed him color-coded map of the park and gestured toward the tank. Chuck puffed out his chest and marched toward it. He got 3 steps in before Travis intercepted him, calm, polite, professional. "Sir, I'm going to need you to remain outside the perimeter," he said, motioning to the taped-off area. Chuck blinked. "I'm here under contract," he replied. "Private Enforcement Division." Delgado emerged just in time to see Chuck attempt to flash laminated badge that said, "Community Asset Protection." He gave one look, took one breath, and said, "Sir, step back now or I'll have you removed." Chuck didn't step back. He stepped forward. Delgado didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He simply made small hand signal. 2 MPs flanked Chuck in seconds, walking him off the property without fuss but with enough quiet dominance that Chuck mumbled something about calling his cousin at the sheriff's office before disappearing down the street. Karen lost it. She turned the bullhorn back on, screaming about constitutional violations, Ho sovereignty, and deep state infiltrators. She accused the National Guard of psychological warfare through vehicle placement. You can't just drop in someone's line of sight and expect them to sleep at night. She shrieked, spinning like weather vane in tornado of rage. Her voice cracked. Her hand shook. "And yet," she continued, "by lunchtime the local news van had arrived. The reporter, a sharp-eyed woman named Jasmine, had seen enough viral insanity in her career to know when to mic up. Quickly, she approached Karen with cautious optimism, hoping for a soundbite. Karen insisted on a 5-minute uninterrupted segment and pitched her own title, Suburbia Under Siege. Jasmine just smiled and nodded. Meanwhile, President Isterlevin sat in his, watching the disaster unfold on multiple screens. His palms were sweaty, his glasses fogged. Karen wasn't just liability anymore. She was contagion. He called an emergency board session with the few remaining members who hadn't resigned in frustration. "We need to strip her of everything," Sheila said, slamming her coffee on the table. "All roles, all privileges, no more clipboard, no more newsletter access, nothing." Unanimous vote followed. Karen was officially persona non grata in her own fiefdom. Back on the sidewalk, the atmosphere resembled reality show finale. Neighbors gathered with popcorn. Kids mimicked Karen's poses, pretending to find their parents' cars with leaves. Someone played the Star-Spangled Banner from Bluetooth speaker ironically. Across the park, Travis updated his logs, noting that the guard was now documenting not just interference but potential legal escalation. Delgado received a call marked urgent. Federal liaison was being dispatched. Karen, oblivious to the storm she had summoned, continued plotting. She was already drafting blog posts about her ongoing resistance. She titled it Operation Ho Freedom. In it, she referenced obscure legal terms she barely understood, quoted Facebook meme about landowner rights, and invoked the Articles of Confederation twice. She was convinced the tank's presence was direct assault on homeowner liberty. She believed that if she just shouted louder, if she filed more complaints, if she called enough numbers, someone somewhere would validate her fury. But validation never came. Instead, the call she placed to a local right-wing talk show was ignored. Her submission to conspiracy blog was flagged for review. Her latest email to the mayor's office bounced. Her allies were dwindling, her narrative unraveling. And still the tank remained. Silent, unmoved, glistening, a sun-like 60-ton monument to everything Karen couldn't control. As evening approached, Delgado stood beside it, arms crossed, watching the neighborhood settle into a kind of uneasy normal. Children rode bikes. A neighbor grilled burgers and offered a plate to one of the soldiers. The guard's tent, once target of outrage, now resembled a community booth. And Karen was in her front window, still watching, still seething, still convinced that tomorrow would be the day she finally reclaimed what she believed she was owed. She didn't know that the federal liaison's car was already en route. She didn't know that the city attorney had begun drafting formal orders. She didn't know that by morning the rules of engagement would shift, and for once they wouldn't be hers to write. The story of the tank was no longer just local farce. It had become stage, and Karen, blinded by entitlement and shielded by delusion, was still center frame. But even center stage comes with consequences, and she was about to learn that the spotlight burns hotter when the stops laughing. The following morning arrived not with the fanfare of horns or shouting, but with an eerie, calculated calm. For the first time in days, Karen's voice was not the first sound to pierce the air. No bullhorn, no barking over bylaws, just the faint rustle of wind through sycamore trees and the steady rumble of municipal vehicles laying down temporary fencing near the tank. Travis stood nearby, clipboard in hand, double-checking measurements while nodding to the city assisting in setting up the perimeter. Delgado monitored from a few paces back, speaking quietly into secure phone line. The atmosphere had shifted. What began as the drill had become an active, federally observed containment zone. Not for military operations, but for civilian interference. Karen awoke late that morning, her hair matted from another restless night pacing, her mind replaying the previous day's humiliation in distorted loops. She had seen the tank from her window, had watched it gleam in the morning sun like an insult polished for effect, and despite every attempt to rally support, she had been met with silence. Her whole board had gone radio silent, her blog posts had drawn more trolls than allies. And the comment sections, once filled with agreement, now teemed with gifs and screen grabs mocking her rants. Still, Karen believed she had one last play left. She spent the morning printing pages and pages of outdated legal jargon, obscure code excerpts, and hand-annotated screenshots of her neighborhood's charter. She stapled them together into packets she titled Citizens Authority Reclamation Protocol and tucked it into red folder with urgent scrawled across the front. She brushed her hair into a top bun, applied lipstick with the intensity of a soldier applying war paint, and marched out the door as if going to court rather than directly into her next public disaster. Across the street, Travis spotted her inside. "She's back," he muttered into his radio. Delgado glanced over without surprise. He'd expected this. The legal documents were already drafted. The limited restriction order had been signed and delivered by the city attorney's office the night before. Karen was now legally barred from entering the drill site perimeter. Delgado tucked the folder into his vest and nodded at Travis. Time to deliver the message. Karen was halfway across the street when they intercepted her. Delgado stepped forward, holding the envelope like ceremonial blade. "This Whitmore," he said, measured and firm. "You are hereby served with city-mandated perimeter restriction. You are not to approach within 30 feet of any equipment or military personnel for the remainder of the exercise." Karen blinked once, twice. Her eyes scanned the document like she could melt it with rage alone. "This is fake," she said, voice trembling. "This is harassment. You forged this." Travis tried to de-escalate, stepping forward with softer tone. "Ma'am, this is official. Signed by the city's legal counsel. We're just enforcing the policy to keep everyone safe." Karen's breath quickened. She clutched her red folder like it could shield her from reality. "You're silencing me. You're afraid of the truth I'm exposing. That tank is an illegal surveillance device. I have reason to believe there are cameras pointed at my home right now." Delgado didn't respond. He simply handed her a second sheet. Copy of the city's cease and desist warning regarding her repeated filing of false reports. Karen tore it in half without reading. "You people think this is over?" I contacted national media, real journalists, people who care about community safety. She stormed back across her lawn, stomping past small wooden sign painted by neighborhood kid that read, "Thank you for your service," in bright blue letters. She didn't see it or didn't care. The tank remained where it was, unmoved, flanked now by a small field of American flags staked in the grass by local scout troops that morning. Inside her home, Karen drafted her next move. If the city wouldn't listen, if the guard wouldn't listen, she'd go higher. She submitted tip to local news station under an alias claiming that unmarked military vehicles were conducting unauthorized surveillance in residential zones. When she received no response, doubled down. At afternoon, she placed a call to the police non-emergency line. Then second call, this time reporting what she called potentially unstable military vehicle with unknown explosives within 100 feet of private homes. It was a mistake she wouldn't be able to take back. Within minutes, her call was flagged. Within the hour, it was traced. 2 unmarked black subs arrived at Hilltop Oak shortly after sunset, their appearance unannounced but unmistakable. Parked without sirens or lights, but the effect was no less arresting. Neighbors froze mid-conversation. Phones came out. Karen, ever the showwoman, met them on her front porch with a smug smile. "Finally," she said, "someone who will actually listen." But the agents didn't come to listen. They came with documentation. One agent, woman in dark blazer with federal badge, spoke first. "Is Karen Whitmore. We're here in response to a series of false and escalating reports made under your name. You are being served with an emergency injunction for interfering with state-level operations during protected training exercise." Karen faltered, her mouth open, ready to argue, to launch into another prepared speech. But the agent continued. You are also under review for violating city safety codes and making knowingly false report to emergency services. We're not pressing federal charges at this time, but continued disruption will escalate this case. Karen's breath hitched. I'm the one being harassed. She managed to say, her voice thin and cracked. I'm the victim here. The agents handed her business card and left without another word. Across the street, Doug stood beside Travis, watching from the tent. How's morale? He asked. Travis smirked. They're building bounce house next to the tank. I'd say we're holding steady. Delgado nodded. Good. Let the neighborhood take it from here, and that they did. The following morning, Hilltop Oaks transformed. Not with protest, but with celebration. Food truck rally pulled in beside the park. Local businesses set up folding tables with lemonade and snacks. Children in plastic helmets lined up to tour the inside of the guard support vehicle. Travis gave thumbs up to the mayor as she arrived for photo ops, the tank smiling next to a group of veterans holding small flags. Heron watched it all from her window, a silent figure behind half-closed blinds. Her red power suit now hung limp on a chair. Her phone buzzed with dozens of missed calls and unread emails. Most from people asking what on earth she had been thinking. Her blog traffic had peaked. But it wasn't support she was receiving. It was ridicule, screenshots, and parodies. Later that afternoon, she stepped outside briefly. Not to participate, but to observe. She had no pet, scribbled aimlessly as if logging violations no one would read. Neighbors nodded politely, then turned away. No one spoke to her. She was a shadow moving through the celebration, unwelcome but too stubborn to retreat. And then the moment came. A teenager named Wyatt, who had live-streamed the original tow truck standoff, approached her with his phone already rolling. He asked the question that would echo across the internet for days. Karen, what exactly were you planning to do if they actually towed the tank, drive it off with your whole golf cart? Karen froze, her face twitched, her lips parted. But no sound came out. She turned, walked away in silence, the crowd behind her laughing not cruelly, but with the disbelief of people witnessing something collapse under the weight of its own absurdity. And the tank, still unmoved, still gleaming, still utterly indifferent. Karen had tried everything. Legal threats, media manipulation, public outrage. But in the end, the most powerful force in Hilltop Oaks wasn't Tank. It was the neighborhood's ability to outlast her. 3 days after the first tow attempt, the tank was still there, perfectly parked, perfectly silent, and still unbothered. But Karen was not. If anything, the stillness of the machine seemed to intensify her unraveling. She no longer operated on schedules or reason. She existed entirely within feedback loop of paranoia, indignation, and false redemption. She began each day with rehearsed monologues in front of her mirror, dressed like Senator going to war, muttering phrases like community endangerment and residential sovereignty with the same intensity someone else might reserve for you. The world, however, had moved on. The tank had become local attraction, even affectionately nicknamed Patty the Park Patriot by the neighborhood kids. Someone added a plastic crown on top of the turret. Another tied a small American flag to the barrel. Parents took photos of their children beside it. High schoolers posed for prom-style pictures. A food truck now operated from the edge of the park, handing out shaved ice to families. What had once been a threat in Karen's eyes had become the heart of spontaneous community celebration. The irony, thick and brutal, eluded only her. Inside the guard's opera tent, Travis and Delgado were finalizing the transition plans for the upcoming appreciation event. The tone of the deployment had shifted completely. What was once meant as a quiet drill had evolved into a neighborhood win for the Guard and an unplanned case study in suburban delusion. Delgado, ever methodical, was compiling incident footage and preparing reports for legal review. Karen's behavior had triggered multiple flags. Interference, false reports, even public safety concerns. The Department of Defense had formally requested case file. It was no longer amusing. It was bureaucratically alive. Back in her house, Karen's delusion had calcified into performance art. She now operated her blog like a wartime broadcast, publishing daily dispatches under banner that read suburbia justice. She spoke in dramatic terms, claiming psychological trauma from armored encroachment and alleging that the guard's presence had caused migratory birds to avoid her garden. She even posted grainy screenshots of the tank at night with yellow arrows pointing to imaginary surveillance devices. Her dwindling followers, mix of conspiracy theorists and hope purists from other states, applauded her courage in the comments. But in Hilltop Oaks, her name had become punchline. The Ho board, now fully turned against her, met to finalize their response. They had tried silence, but the situation had gone beyond internal discipline. They voted unanimously to issue a public letter disavowing Karen's actions. It was printed and distributed to every mailbox on the block. In it, they made clear that Karen held no official role, that her orders had no legal standing, and that the community stood in full support of the National Guard exercise. The letter was posted at the park beside the tank under a laminated sign that read, "Our host speaks with one voice, and it is not hers." Karen, upon seeing it, tore it down and live streamed the act, calling it "Purge of Truth." Her phone was now more weapon than tool. She went live up to 5 times a day, speaking into the camera with the solemnity of prophet and the fury of someone being slowly erased. "They want to shut me up," she said during dream, eyes wide and unblinking, "but I will not be silenced. I will not be removed from history." Behind her, a neighbor walked by with toddler holding balloons shaped like tank. Neither acknowledged her. The guard had begun collecting daily incident logs into an encrypted archive. Each of Karen's rants, each approach to the tank, each line crossed, it all became part of larger pattern. Delgado received word from the federal liaison that preliminary investigation was being opened. They needed all footage, all statements, all contact records. She was officially case now, not just name. And then came the interview. A production band from a national talk show arrived mid-morning, unannounced but expected. Karen had contacted them herself, offering what she called an exclusive whistleblower narrative. She greeted the crew like she was stepping onto campaign stage, arms wide, lips red, eyes hungry for vindication. The host, middle-aged man known for viral ambushes, played it cool, nodding and smiling as she led him to the park. Cameras rolled, microphones clipped, stood proudly in front of the tank and began recounting her version of events. But the tone shifted quickly. The host cut her off mid-sentence with a playback of her own live stream where she claimed the guard was implanting trackers in suburban lawns. She tried to pivot. He played a clip of her calling in a fake bomb threat. She stammered. He quoted the city's cease and desist. She insisted it was forged. He showed her documents signed by the mayor. Her composure cracked. Her voice wavered. Her hands clenched into fists at her sides. "I'm being railroaded," she said. Censorship. Behind the camera, neighbors gathered again, filming the filming, murmuring, laughing. Some booed softly. One kid held up a sign that read "Karen versus the Tank, Episode 4. The interview ended with no redemption, no clarity. Just footage of woman trying to claw her way out of a story she had written herself. The crew packed quickly and left. Karen stood alone at the edge of the park, red-faced and visibly trembling. She walked back to her house like someone coming down from fever dreams, shoulders hunched, eyes glassy. That night, the neighborhood glowed under lights and soft lanterns. The guard hosted commute BBU. Music played. Laughter rolled across the lawns. A small group of veterans spoke to the crowd, thanking everyone for their kindness. Children lined up to climb the steps of the tank, posing with mock salutes. Travis flipped burgers beside a table of donated pastries. Delgado handed out thank you cards signed by the unit. No one mentioned Karen. From her window, she watched it all. A silent observer in a house that now felt smaller, colder. Her blog had gone quiet. Her inbox was filled with audible replies and media rejections. Her name was trending, but for the wrong reasons. She had become the meme, not the message. The next morning, she stepped outside for the first time since the interview. She wore beige slacks and a scarf patterned with small American flags. She held her notepad like heroic, pretending to log event violations. But no one asked what she was doing. No one stopped to chat. Even the dogs ignored her. The community had moved on, evolved past her noise. Still, she walked the perimeter of the event space, muttering to herself about noise, decibels, and unauthorized chalk art. As she approached her driveway, a sleek black SUV pulled up. She recognized the logo, the same talk show crew. Her face lit up again. Redemption, perhaps. But the host didn't exit. Different man stepped out, producer with polite smile and release form. "We're airing the segment tonight," he said. "Just wanted to offer you the chance to watch it before broadcast." She agreed. Inside, she sat alone on her couch, lights off, TV low, and the segment played. Her voice clipped and auto-tuned, her face freeze-framed. Side-by-side footage of community members laughing, children playing, the tank shining beneath rainbow of balloons, and her screaming about conspiracies, looking less like a protector and more like a parody. At the end, the host awarded her the satirical Golden Clipboard Award for unnecessary civic interference. Laughter erupted from the studio audience. Karen didn't laugh. She simply stared at the screen, fingers twitching around her now empty notepad. Her phone buzzed repeatedly. Notifications, tags, messages from strangers calling her names she hadn't yet learned. Ignore. 3 days later, the tank was gone, loaded onto transport vehicle at dawn, escorted out quietly while the neighborhood still slept. No horns, no ceremony. Just the fading echo of steel treads against pavement. Travis and Delgado packed up the last of the equipment, thanked the neighbors, and left behind a wooden sign that read, "Thank you, Hilltop Oaks." It was simple, unassuming, permanent. Karen watched from behind curtain. She didn't wave, didn't speak. The house felt empty now. Her voice had become an echo chamber. Her clipboard untouched. Her blog dormant. The Hoa had formally barred her from all committee. For 1 year, city citation for false reporting was still pending, but worse than any of that was the quiet. The knowledge that she had screamed at the storm and been left behind by the weather. The tank had moved on, but her legacy was parked forever. Karen stood by her upstairs window, her silhouette barely lit by the soft morning sun that now streamed across the tidy rooftops of Hilltop Oaks. Down below, the lawns were freshly trimmed, driveways lined with cheerful flags, and neighbors were already out setting up folding chairs for what had become an annual community tradition, the tank appreciation picnic. But this year there was no tank. Patty the Park Patriot had moved on. The National Guard had completed its rotation weeks ago, leaving behind a newly poured sidewalk section where the treads had left their temporary marking, a bench installed by the city with a plaque that read, "To order and service." Hilltop Oaks remembers, yet Karen's presence still lingered like smoke after small but unforgettable fire. Inside her home, the lights remained dim, and most of the once meticulous decor had fallen into neglect. The glass case that once held her Hoa Excellence Self-Awards was now partially empty. Her laptop sat idle on the dining table, her blog frozen in time since her last failed post titled, "When Liberty is Parked Against Your Will." The comment section had quickly devolved into a mixture of mockery and unsolicited offers for branded merchandise like Karen versus the Tank coffee mugs. She had deleted none of it. Strange part of her, perhaps the only honest one left, had accepted that she was no longer feared, respected, or disliked. She was just tolerated former nuisance dulled by her own overexposure. Outside, Wyatt, the teen who had famously asked her whether she intended to tow a tank with her Hoa golf cart, was now organizing the community trivia game by the park. He had become something of a local celebrity, not because he sought attention, but because his one-liner had become part of Hilltop folklore. His stream had gone viral again just 2 days ago when he watched old clips of Karen's original bullhorn confrontation while doing commute. Voiceover, complete with dramatic violin music and closed captions that read, "The delusions intensify." Karen had seen the video. She didn't comment, didn't report it, didn't react. She simply watched and then closed her laptop slowly, like shutting the lid on coffin. Her relationship with the community had shifted from confrontational to ghostly. No more clipboard patrols. No more surprise Hoa violation notices stuck under windshields. Sheila, who had taken over informal beautification duties, now smiled as she walked past Karen's house, but never stopped to chat. Other neighbors, once wary of Karen's proximity, now treated her as distant background. An architectural quirk of the neighborhood, like that one mailbox that always leaned slightly left no matter how many times it was straightened. And yet Karen remained active. Not publicly, but inwardly. She read legal blogs late at night, searching for obscure Hoa loopholes or retroactive clauses that might validate her actions. Even if only symbolically, she emailed retired judge who had written book on municipal overreach and received polite one-sentence reply, "Is, would more tanks fall under federal jurisdiction? Please let this go." She did one afternoon while walking to the mailbox in oversized sunglasses and floppy sun hat, as if she might be recognized and mobbed for autographs. Karen noticed something unusual tucked among the pizza flyers and energy drink coupons. Small envelope, handwritten, sealed with gold wax. Curious, she opened it on the spot. Inside was neatly folded letter signed by Travis. Not formal report, not legal notice, just note typed with quiet precision. "Is Whitmore, I hope this note finds you in peace." While our presence in Hilltop Oaks was brief, the experience remains one of the most unique deployments I've participated in. I've been asked to submit my incident reports for training module titled Community Relations in High-Intensity Civilian Environments. Your actions, though disruptive, have provided key insights into how modern authority structures interact with microgovernance communities like Hoa's. This isn't sarcasm. It's acknowledgement. Played role, not the one you intended, but one that mattered. May the silence now be your sanctuary, not your sentence. Respectfully, SGT Travis D. Haynes. Karen read the letter 3 times. She didn't smile. She didn't tear it up. She just held it. Flicker of something. Recognition, maybe, or the bitter taste of unintended legacy passed over her face. That night, she didn't post blog. Instead, she opened blank Word document and began typing, not rant, not manifesto, just her own recollection. Private version of events, absent the outrage, stripped of the fantasy of persecution. It wasn't confession. It wasn't even an apology. It was just told plainly for no one but herself. Across the street, the new Hoa president, a retired Marine named Doug, organized another cleanup initiative. He had taken a more relaxed approach to neighborhood order. encouraging flower gardens, allowing artistic mailbox designs, even tolerating the controversial inflatable Santa riding unicorn during Christmas season. Doug had written Karen a letter once inviting her to participate in a panel about healing from community conflict. She never responded. Still, he left the invitation open. By midsummer, the only physical reminder of the tank was a small statue carved from reclaimed metal and installed at the center of the park, commissioned by the city after the incident received a humorous but glowing write-up in a regional magazine. The piece, titled "Immovable," was abstract. Some said it looked like coiled spring. Others saw barricade. Karen, when she first saw it, muttered that it looked like crumpled beer can, but she never protested it. Organized petition, she just walked past it without comment during her weekly dusk walks, clipboardless, bullhornless, invisible. Then came the letter from the city, delivered in a crisp white envelope. It summarized the final decisions on the pending complaints. Karen would not be charged federally, but she would remain under a civic sanction prohibiting her from contacting city offices regarding military-grade equipment or state-sanctioned drills for the next 5 years. Her access to future home meetings would remain restricted unless formally invited, and she would be required to community relations course if she wished to resume any leadership role. She read it in silence, folded it, and filed it behind her utility bills. For the first time, she didn't threaten to appeal. That weekend, during neighborhood movie night on the lawn, projector played montage of community moments, birthday parties, garage sales, the new picnic table installation. Toward the end, short clip from the tank incident was inserted as comic relief. Karen Midrant, Duke the tow truck driver, blinking in disbelief, and Travis whispering, "She really said sovereignty." The crowd roared with laughter. Even the kids, too young to understand, joined in. Karen watched from her porch, expression unreadable. She didn't storm out. She didn't shout. She simply watched until the movie ended, then retreated inside, one hand lightly touching the frame of her door as if making sure it was still hers. By fall, the lawns had turned golden. Pumpkins appeared on porches. And Karen, though still a figure in the neighborhood's collective memory, had begun to fade. Fewer people pointed at her house. The jokes became occasional instead of constant. Her name was no longer trending, but among the town's quieter circles, new residents who arrived post-incident, she became whispered curiosity. "She's the one who tried to tow the tank," they'd say, half laughing, half amazed. "No, really, whole tank with clipboard." And as the leaves fell and the wind returned, Karen remained not as villain, not even as legend, but as relic of what happens when power, however small, meets immovable reality. The tank had rolled on, the world had laughed, but Karen had learned that when you try to command the immovable, you risk becoming invisible. And maybe just she was finally okay with that.